Hello and welcome to this live discussion brought to you by The Wire and being transmitted through our YouTube channel. The topic for discussion this particular session is the political crisis in Brazil after the conviction of former President Lula, prominent Brazilian statesman, former president, who headed the Workers' Party and is widely seen as a frontrunner should he be allowed to stand as president for the 2018 presidential election. Joining me to discuss Lula's conviction, its significance and consequences, and the lay of the land for Brazil's politics is Shobhan Saxena. Shobhan is a journalist of long standing with many years' experience writing for the Times of India, for The Hindu, for The Wire, of course, based in Sao Paulo, Brazil for the last 5 years, and teaching about India and on foreign policy and international issues at the University of Sao Paulo. Shobhan, you've been writing a lot for us, but this is the first time we're doing a video chat with you, so welcome to The Wire's viewers this time.
Thank you so much.
And let's plunge straight in. You know, the news of, we knew that Lula was under pressure.
Right.
And when Dilma Rousseff was impeached, in fact, when the whole move to impeach her began seriously in 2016, we had read about how attempts were being made by the right wing and by prosecutors to connect Lula to the overall scandal.
Right.
But that a case would proceed so quickly and end up in his conviction for corruption is something that was really quite unbelievable for people here who have a very, very different image and impression of Lula as somebody who fights for people's rights, is really a statesman at one point, a much loved figure around the world, and I think somebody who still commands a great deal of popularity in Brazil. So he, of course, has denied, he and his lawyers have said that the charges are a fabrication and that he will appeal, and many people in Brazil also support what he's saying. For the benefit of our viewers, will you explain a little bit about what the nature of these charges are and how valid is President Lula's or Mr. Lula's declaration that the entire case against him is a fabrication?
Okay, in Brazil there are two views about the whole Lula case. One is, of course, that Brazil has become a more mature country because they have just convicted a former president who's also an iconic figure. And there's another view that there's a witch hunt going on against the Workers' Party, which Lula is the head of that party. That is the second view. But coming back to the question about what are the charges, the charge against Lula is that his wife actually, who passed away last year because of brain hemorrhage, she invested some money or sought some interest in a triplex in the city of Guarujá, which is in the state of Sao Paulo, and that money was paid by OAS, which is one of the biggest construction companies. The interesting part here is that the evidence against Lula is very, very thin. He has been convicted. I mean, this is not my view. This is a view of many legal experts. And this is also a view of Lula's lawyers, that the evidence is very, very shaky. Nothing concrete was produced in the court. And it's very funny that the judge, the Sergio Moro, who has been behaving like as if he's on a mission, he even quoted some newspaper articles to support that Lula is really corrupt and he took share in that triplex. So he has been convicted for 9.5 years. He can still appeal and he can still, it can be overturned. But at the moment it seems that Lula is in really deep problem. It's really shocking because Lula is not an ordinary leader. He's an iconic figure, not just for Brazil, not just for South America, but I think for the whole global South. Yeah.
How does the legal system in Brazil work? I mean, what stage, to whom does he appeal? And normally, how quickly are these appeals disposed of?
I think he's been convicted by a federal court based in the city of Curitiba in the south of Brazil. Now he can appeal, he can go next to he can appeal in the federal appeals court. Minimum it can take 8 months and maximum it can go to 1.5 years. And this timing is really, really significant.
So the federal appeals court is in Curitiba or in Brazil?
State of Sao Paulo.
State of Sao Paulo, okay.
Yes.
And then eventually Supreme Court as well, right?
Of course, yeah, Supreme Court as well.
And the time frame?
Minimum 8 months, maximum 1.5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, assuming that, is there a deadline by which he has to clear his name in order to be able to stand for the 2018 election? Is there a particular month by which?
Yeah, I think the process of filing a nomination for 2018 begins in April. So we're looking at about almost 10 months.
Right.
So if he appeals now and it's overturned, I think he's clear. But if the case drags on for more than a year and a half, then Lula cannot contest the election, and that is the crux of this case.
So under Brazilian law, a politician or an individual convicted of corruption or any crime cannot stand for election until all appeals are exhausted.
No, he cannot.
Right.
No.
Right. Okay. So in India, it's the other way around in some ways, because here you can go on appeal, and courts have often taken the view that the final appeal is what matters.
Yeah. In fact, Judge Moro, in his judgment, he said that he wanted to ban Lula from politics for 18 years right away.
Right.
But he didn't do it because he's a former president.
Right.
But I think technically Lula is in a very, very tight spot at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Now, what is the connection between the case against Lula and the charges that were made against Dilma Rousseff when she was impeached in August 2016?
Actually, there's no connection. I mean, if you read the Western media, it seems that there's a big corruption scandal, which is called Operation Car Wash, Operation Lava Jato, and both Lula and Dilma both part of it. But Dilma Rousseff was impeached for a budgetary discrepancy by the Senate and the Congress, which meant that actually her government has spent more money than they had in the kitty. That was a case against her. But I think the way the reporting has been done by the Western press and also the Brazilian press, which is very, very, the mainstream Brazilian media, which is very, very elitist, they have mixed up everything. It seems like that Lula is corrupt, Dilma is corrupt, and she was impeached for corruption. Actually, she was not impeached for corruption. But Lula case is very much a case of corruption.
And what would Dilma Rousseff's status be if can she contest an election in the future?
She can. Not the presidential election, but she can contest elections. I mean, legally she can. And this is also very interesting because in the past, when Nicola was convicted, he was banned from politics, life ban on politics. But he went to Supreme Court and it was overturned. But not in case of Dilma. They impeached her, but they didn't ban her from participating in future elections or from politics at all.
Okay. So in terms of the wider political players, we know that President Michel Temer, who was the vice president who succeeded Dilma Rousseff when she was impeached and is now the president, is also under a cloud of sorts. There are charges against him. Is it likely that the move to impeach him may also proceed, or what's the status of the cases or the charges against him?
I think it's very interesting. If you look at this Operation Car Wash or the whole corruption scandal, all political parties are involved in this corruption, but the politicians and
this was kickbacks involving money from Petrobras
and Odebrecht, all these companies. So they all have been receiving kickbacks. And Michel Temer, of course, he's been accused. He can't contest any election in the future because of other reasons. But all the politicians who have been convicted and sent to the jail so far are from Workers' Party. Michel Temer's party, PMDB, no one has gone to jail. Aécio Neves, who was the presidential candidate in 2014, and he lost to Dilma Rousseff. He hasn't gone to jail. He has been caught on tape asking for bribes.
And he's the Social Democratic Party of Brazil guy.
Yeah, it's a so-called Social Democratic Party, but it's an absolutely right-wing party. And he's been caught on tape asking for for the murder of certain people who have evidence. And he was stripped of his post in Senate, but he's back now. So he's back in Senate, and Michel Temer is very much there. I think there's talk of Temer's impeachment, but I think he has got such solid backing from the country's elite and the media. I don't see that happening very much. Also, it's very interesting, the day Lula was impeached, Brazil passed a massive labor reforms law, and which has basically undone the past 70 years of labor rights in Brazil have been completely undone with.
The day that Dilma was impeached?
No, Lula was
convicted.
Okay. The Senate passes new law, so which basically
this is a brand new law.
Brand new law.
What does it do in terms of workers' rights?
I mean, in terms of a minimum salary, in terms of leave, in terms of all the benefits they have received in past 70 years have been basically taken away. People are saying Brazil has gone back to 19th century in terms of labor rights. So
now the presidential election is pretty much a year away from now. If assuming that Lula does not succeed in getting his conviction overturned, what would you rate the PT's prospects as being? Do they have another candidate? Do they have another face that they can project, and who could win support?
Yeah, I think this is a problem in PT, that they don't really have leaders. But this is a problem in general in Brazilian politics. You don't have good, charismatic or statesman-like figures in all political parties. But I think Lula, because he's in a problem, and there's a general feeling among the leftist groups that Lula should not contest the election, because even if he contests elections, Brazil is so badly divided now, not rich and poor and black and white, that he won't be able to rule the country. They will begin demonstrations. So there's a possibility that Fernando Haddad, who used to be the Sao Paulo mayor, who's a young politician, he was a very he's done major reforms in Sao Paulo, could be the next candidate, and that could be interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
You've written about him for
I've written
for the Wire. You
for
did a
Wire.
profile
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
as an individual and in terms of an urban experiment.
Yeah.
But coming back to the legal process, in India we're used to, of course, judges have leanings of one kind or the other.
Right.
But by and large, the judiciary exists independently of the legislature and the executive, and of course political parties, right? Now, in Brazil, we have read about connections between Judge Moro, who was the judge who has convicted Lula, and the Social Democratic Party
Yes. Yeah.
of Brazil. What exactly is the connection between Moro and the party and the PSDB?
I mean, there's no open connection as such,
Yeah.
but he's been seen in the company at social occasions,
Okay.
at award functions,
Right.
and these are the politicians who are having cases in his court.
Right.
So this is, I think, there's a general conflict of interest.
Right.
They're sharing jokes and they're talking
Right.
In hushed tones.
Right.
There's a conflict of interest, and also interestingly, I mean, Sergio Moro also fancies himself as the next president of Brazil. I mean, he's also running a number 3 or 4 in opinion polls.
And constitutionally, that is allowed? For
No,
that
of course he'll have to quit his
He'll have to
post
quit the
and
judiciary,
continue.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so he's very often on the covers of magazines saying Brazil's savior and Brazil's next president. So it's an open secret that he has political ambitions. So I think there's a huge conflict of interest given his profile, his interaction with politicians from other parties, and his own ambition. This is a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
And interestingly, in this judgment, he said many times that I'm totally impartial, him totally impartial. There's no need for a judge to assert again that he's impartial. He's supposed to be impartial. Yeah.
Right. So none of the established players, Neves is gone, Dilma is gone, Lula looks like he will not survive if he doesn't reverse the conviction. Temer is finished. What about Marina Silva, who was earlier a minister in Lula's government, Green Party, then she stood as a presidential candidate in 2014, was expected to do much better than she finally did.
Right.
But in fact, she was meant to be the main challenger to Rousseff, but finally she came third.
Yes.
She is still nursing ambitions, presumably.
Yes, she has, but I think she's running at number 2 in opinion polls after Lula.
And this would be on the Socialist Party ticket, right?
Yeah, she's still a member of Socialist, but I think she's lost a lot of her political capital. She's not seen as a reliable politician by a lot of Brazilians. I think in the past 5-10 years, she has changed political parties 3 times. And
in one direction or back and forth?
I think different directions. And if you look at her agenda, it's very environmental driven, very left driven, but she's supported by big banks, so there's a big contradiction there, and people talk about her connection with George Soros organizations and things like that. So I think she's still an important player, but
in terms of the racial politics of Brazil, it's something quite novel though, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, she was being called, at one point Brazil's Obama, because she comes from a black background. She's evangelical. She has a lot of support among evangelicals. She's from the state of Amazon. She's worked there. But I don't think Marina Silva becoming president in Brazil in this kind of very tough environment, very complicated situation for her to.
So you'd say things are completely open-ended as of now, both in terms of the support that different political parties will draw, and of course the faces that we don't know.
Yeah, I think one possibility is the current mayor of Sao Paulo, Doria, who's like a Trump-like figure.
Right.
He's a billionaire, and he has been to reality TV shows in Brazil, and he's completely right-wing, both politically and economically. And I think he's positioning himself as an ex-president.
Right.
So we can see Doria versus Fernando Haddad. That will be interesting.
Two city people.
City people, because Sao Paulo being the biggest state in the country, biggest city there could be. But I think since Dilma's impeachment, a lot of middle class people have also realized what happened in the country and the way the rights have been taken away. Government has cut down massively on education, health. There's a freeze of 20 years now on investment in health and education. So a lot of people are being affected. And the workers' rights being taken away. I think there's going to be a realignment of forces in Brazil, but it's an open game. It can turn right or it can turn left.
Right. So very much like a Sanders versus Trump,
Yes.
Sanders, Hillary versus Trump, and finally you had a very unpredictable outcome and an outcome which is not really very happy for people in the United States.
Exactly. I mean, this is a difficult situation. I think anyone can exploit it, the right or the left, because people are unhappy, economy has been down, corruption is scandal, lifestyle, the living wages have gone down.
Right.
So people are looking for someone more stable and strong leader.
And commentators in North America have frequently decried what they have called left-wing populism in Latin America.
Yeah.
Talking of Evo Morales or the Kirchners in Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, etc. Maybe now the ground is being prepared for a right-wing populist of some kind.
Yeah, I think North American and also to an extent European media, they misread, maybe deliberately, the situation in Latin America. Because what happened in Brazil in the past 12, 15 years, it really doesn't suit them. Economic policies and especially foreign policy. Brazil followed a very, very independent foreign policy under both Lula and Dilma Rousseff. They made investment in Africa. Lula opened embassies in Africa, and Brazil was trying to engage with the wider world. The BRICS, IPSA, the Global South, all this. That doesn't work very well with Washington. And also, of course, there's a China angle, how China has become an important player. So I think there's a very, very strong angle of this interference from North America in terms of Koch brothers putting money in this right-wing people's movement, and so there's a complete subversion of Brazil as a country. So that's my opinion.
So we'll on that note we'll leave it here, but we will of course continue to draw on your expertise as you write for us from Sao Paulo on what will be a fascinating year in Brazil and of course South America.
Yeah.
So that wraps it up for our discussion on Brazil. Brazil may be geographically very far away from India, but as joint members of BRICS and of IPSA, there's plenty that the two countries have been trying to do and will continue to do in the future. And of course, a lot depends on the level of interest that the government in Brasilia displays toward these kinds of connections. What we do know is that the next year is really quite difficult to read at this stage, but we do hope that whatever does evolve produces a government in Brazil that continues that kind of engagement with India and of course the wider world on the basis of an independent foreign policy. On that note, thank you very much for watching.